Hi everyone, my name is Hillary Perry Smith, and today we're going to talk about how to manage referral and termination as a therapist or counselor. This video clip provides you with a real-life story of how intense this termination process can be for a client. It's so real, it's so important, and it's crucial for us as counselors to be mindful of this process for them. It's also a direct look into the window of how important our work is as a counselor.
I went through one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life about a week ago. As I've mentioned in previous videos, for 2.5 years, I saw a therapist after having serious suicidal ideation and ending up in the hospital. About a month ago, my therapist told me she was moving out of state. About a week ago, I found out that my clinic was closing completely. It kind of helped hearing about the clinic thing because even if our time wasn't ending because she was moving, it would have ended in a month anyway due to the clinic closing. It made it hurt a little less and helped me realize more that it was less about this person leaving me. We were hitting a lot of breakthroughs in these past few months than we have in the entire 2.5 years, and the timing was just about as terrible as it can get. In the past 4 months, I received indirect closure about a failed friendship from a few months ago. I lost a family that I was a part of for 3 years. I lost trust in a group because of a whole misunderstanding that was taken out on me, and I was severely depressed over all of it. I haven't been doing well, and that's why I haven't made videos, but back to the point. After experiencing people close to me walking out on me, after losing people my entire life, being forced to say goodbye was not one of the easier things I've ever done. As someone who has experienced a significant amount of death with people who have been very close to me, I can honestly say that the feelings that I've experienced through this, it brings the same feelings of seeing someone dying. Every time you visit them, you realize that this is one step closer to the last time you're ever going to see them. And every week leading up to it, I became more and more anxious. The last day of our session, I was waiting calmly in the office. I had a fairly decent day, I was relaxed, things were okay. The whole week prior, I had major anxiety leading up to it, but that was about it. I saw her client before me walk out of the office, pause for a second, and then just completely jet out. I kept my cool up until that point. Once I saw his facial expression and how upset he was before he just bolted out, that just brought tears to my eyes. So it was my time. I get into the office and I run straight to the tissue box, which is something I never do upon arrival. So I sit down, my eyes are dripping, my leg is bouncing, and then for some reason, this is something I've never even really done before. I'm sitting there like this, like with the back of my thumb in my mouth. I don't know what it was, if it was just like a resort to comfort, but that's something I've never really seen myself do before. This was my last chance to be vulnerable with the person who has seen the rawest, most real sides of me for the past 2.5 years. And boy, did I go all out with that. We had a normal session in the beginning, and then we ended just talking about the future and how I'm gonna move on and work with someone new. I was scared that this was gonna be like when I first started therapy, where I was severely depressed, feeling like I had nothing, and feeling like I know nothing about my depression and my struggles, and just not knowing how to cope with it all. I was disregarding all of the breakthroughs that I had had, and I was not attributing them to myself. I regarded those as accomplishments of my therapist, and they had like nothing to do with me. There were a lot of things that we figured out together, and I just have a hard time convincing myself of that. I wish I could have had the camera out or something just to remember like the last few moments of dialogue, because I was just so anxious and distracted that it was almost hard to keep the whole thing in my memory. It's like I wanted to get rid of it the second that it was happening. The piece of dialogue that really stuck out to me was how she was saying how even though she jokes and says that she's fabulous sometimes, that realistically she is not the #1 best therapist out there. And how even though we had an incredible and long-lasting relationship that I felt was so beneficial to my mental health, that doesn't mean I can't have a better relationship with another therapist. She said how I made myself open and vulnerable, and that's helped me succeed in therapy. And how I'm so resilient in many aspects of my life, and if I apply that to the work that I do in therapy in the future, then I'll be okay. And she kept emphasizing how some people will come in and come for 2 sessions or come in for 2 months, but I stayed for over 2 years, and that's something in itself to be proud of. And she kept saying, don't think that you're at the same point that you were at 2 years ago, because now all of these little breakthroughs we've had that we unfortunately didn't have the time to work on, I can bring those to the new therapist and we can pinpoint exactly what's wrong and how we can work to fix it. Before the session ended, she specifically asked me if I had been keeping up with making videos, which I said I haven't been because I had been so depressed. She encouraged me to start making them again and not worry about the things that I was worrying about, like putting on makeup or putting on a happy face, because it's hard to sit in front of the camera and look pretty when in reality you're feeling so terrible inside to the point where you can barely get out of bed, let alone write a script for a video. I like to make videos when I'm happy and when I've resolved something and when I have accomplishments to share, or when I've gotten over something and I could share my mistakes and teach other people how to do things a different way. But I'm going to take her advice, maybe not come on here natural face like I just rolled out of bed, but maybe I don't necessarily need to come on here care and seem happy all the time. So now how do we move on from here? For right now, I'm doing okay, and for someone who hasn't been doing okay for a while, I am okay with being okay. That is a big accomplishment from how I have been feeling. Right now, it's just a good idea for me to flush out the sad feelings and hopefully get back to where I was 4 months ago. Taking a break from therapy isn't necessarily a bad thing, so nobody should ever think of it that way. I'm currently trying to figure out a new situation with a new therapist, so let's hope that that all goes well. After doing a lot of research, I learned that there isn't a lot of advice or information on this topic because usually the client is the one who is terminating the session because they either reach their goals or they feel that they're not reaching their goals and want to try working with someone else. So while it's usually the client breaking up with the therapist, here it's the opposite. And it sucks having these feelings of worthlessness and feeling like you're being left by the one person who is supposed to be here for you. But in a scenario like this, you need to tell yourself that your therapist's personal decisions are not being done to purposely hurt or inconvenience you. They're not leaving because they're giving up on you, they're leaving because they have their own lives to lead. So I hope this helps some of you if you've ever experienced this sort of thing. Be sure to subscribe for more videos. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Termination and referral is when the client-therapist relationship ends, and this can occur in many different circumstances, as the video explained. Termination often means that the sessions are ending and the client will no longer make visits for counseling sessions. Referral may mean when the client is referred to another therapist or even another form of treatment. Sometimes this can be extra intimidating for fear of whether or not the client will adjust well to the new therapist environment and/or treatment type. And though termination may mean all of these different things, it feels so much more intense and more difficult for our clients. The biggest thing to remember as a therapist is that this is a process or a stage. Termination is said to be much more than an act of signifying an end of therapy. It's an integral part of the process of therapy, and if properly understood and managed, may be an important factor in the instigation of change. As a general rule of thumb, terminations should constitute for 1/6 of the time of the therapeutic process. If handled inappropriately, termination may not only conclude this experience without effective change for the member or members, but also so adversely affect individuals that they may not seek further help when necessary. For some clients, this can dig up some unwanted feelings and emotions from the past. For example, it would have special significance for those individuals who, growing up, suffered from individuation, separation, and dependency issues. Appropriate termination of therapy includes many important issues and activities as part of the stages of termination. This stage can be viewed as having 3 primary functions. First, decide if the client's ready. Second, resolve remaining affective issues and bringing about appropriate closure of the significant and often intense relationship between client and counselor. And third, maximize transfer or learning and increase client's self-reliance and confidence in his or her ability to manage change after counseling has ended. The extent to which each of these stages needs to be worked on depends on each individual client and their needs, but definitely needs to be addressed carefully and thoroughly with each client. As more and more research has been done on the termination process in counseling, it's been found that you'll start to notice some themes and tasks that need to be noticed throughout the closure process. Addressing and working through these themes, obviously guided by the needs of your specific client, will only create a more effective termination process. Some themes you may begin to notice are sadness, loss, separation, closure, increased self-efficacy and personal power, transfer of learning, ending, growing up, reviewing, summarizing, consolidating, and saying goodbye. As you may have heard, some of these themes are awesome. They're great. They're good things. We want our clients to pick up on self-reliance and personal power. However, we may also see an increase in more negative themes, which will then need more attention from us as a therapist. As I briefly mentioned earlier, one of the most important tasks during this time is to manage termination as a stage. It should not be terminated during the session when it is first discussed. If you are seeing, there are many different stages and effects that this process can have on a client, so it must not be rushed and decided quickly. As part of managing this process as a counselor, there are many behaviors that will be onset during this stage other than direct verbal statements made by the client or therapist. Some of those behaviors might be decrease in intensity of the work in counseling, lateness, joking, intellectualizing, missed appointments, acting out, regression to earlier and less mature behavior patterns, withdrawal, denial, expression of anger, and even mourning. It also may include feelings of separation and loss, dissolution, futility, impotence, dependency, inadequacy, and abandonment. If a client were to increasingly engage in these behaviors or feelings but doesn't verbalize it, it may be necessary for the counselor to initiate the termination process. It's always necessary for the counselor to guide the appropriate working through of both task and relationship issues of termination. After the subject of termination has been brought up or initiated, it's necessary that the counseling process be restructured to focus issues of the evaluation and assessment of counseling progress and, therefore, on client readiness for termination. A huge and very important step in this process is evaluating the client's readiness. One thing we have to remember as a counselor is that counseling or the therapeutic process will never resolve all the problems, remove all the symptoms, or result in complete cure. It's not uncommon for the fantasy to occur that where there's hope for a complete cure among helping professionals. However, even those kinds of goals are useful as a benchmark against which the counseling process can be measured. A more realistic view recognizes the importance of clinical judgment or client readiness to end the treatment process. Variables such as working through the end of the client-counselor relationship, feelings of grief and sorrow, and learning how to handle endings productively are really important, but difficult or impossible to objectify or to be anticipated by clients early in the counseling process. In order to effectively establish client readiness to leave counseling, some areas that might be useful to pay attention to are examining whether initial problems or symptoms have been reduced or eliminated, determine whether the stress that motivated the client to seek counseling has dissipated, assess increased coping ability, assess the increased understanding and value of self and others, determine increased level of relating to others and loving and being loved, examine increased ability to plan and work productively, and lastly, evaluate increase in the capacity to play and enjoy life. One last note is to see the extent to which the client come to feel confident and continue life effectively without counseling. We want this to be a great ending and to be a very useful process, not a difficult journey, only to send them off with feelings of sadness and patterns of regression. The guiding principles in the productive management is to treat the termination process as a stage in its own right, and therefore to give significant termination issues the attention they deserve. Effective closure in the counseling process in a well-managed termination stage can help to solidify clients' learning and to maximize their continued self-efficacy and success after counseling. The role of effective termination procedures in helping the client take appropriate and mature leave of the counseling process can be described as termination of therapy and can be thought of as preparation for multiple preceding goodbyes of living. At the same time, it's a preparation for being able to deal more adequately and openly with future goodbyes. So, not only are we helping with this particular process, we want to set our clients up for success in trying to say goodbye to other areas of life and future situations and circumstances. And lastly, a quote, "Parting can be such productive sorrow." Yes, it's going to be hard and it's going to be difficult for both parties, but there's so much to learn out of this process, and it's a great way to make this a positive process for future circumstances.